Can you hear me? Good. Okay, so I put up here on the screen some URLs. They both take you to the same place. For the workshop, there's a Google Code Lab that you can follow along. It'll have all the instructions for everything you need to do, so you can pull it down to your laptop and see what's going on and go at your own pace if you want to. You can go ahead. And if I move faster than you, then you'll still have the slides there to look at for the Code Lab. So just make sure everyone can get there. I'll just give you a sec. I'll leave this up for a minute. Quickly, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jason DOBRY, like she said. I work for Google. I work in the Google Cloud Platform in developer relations. Most of what I do is open source, and I get to come talk to people like you all the time. It's really fun. I also have with me Cato from Firebase, Brett, who's also on Cloud Platform, and James, who's with Firebase as well. I think he went over there. There he is. He's raising his hand. So if you have any questions during the workshop, feel free to raise your hand, and one of them will come help you. So you can look forward to that. Everybody made it? Do I need to leave this up a little longer? Nod your head if you're ready to go. Okay, I see lots of nods. Let's boogie. So this is what you should be seeing if you made it to the URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an existing Firebase Angular Fire app, and we're going to extend it. We're going to improve its functionality using Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions is a new product recently announced. It's in beta currently. What it is it is a serverless platform. You can write Node.js code, and we'll deploy it and scale it for you. When you deploy the code, you can specify under what conditions the function should be executed. For example, when I make an HTTP request to this endpoint, that's when you execute the code, and then it'll send you the response. Another example would be in a Firebase context, some user just uploaded a new image to Firebase storage, and so I therefore want to execute some function in response to that. And then you can do something like resize the image and create a thumbnail and upload that. Or you want to execute a function because a new user signed up. That's another event. And you want to send them an email, like a welcome email. You can do that in a Cloud Function. So personally, I was waiting for Cloud Functions for years with Firebase. I felt like it was like that one key feature that you just needed, because you're doing lots of stuff in the browser. You got the real-time database syncing between clients. But there's always that one thing you need a server to do. And now you can do it in Cloud Functions. So we're going to do it today. The chat app itself, I think I have a working version I can pull up. I'll just show you what it does. I must not be signed in. So it allows you to sign in using the Firebase authentication schemes. We're going to use Google for this code lab, of course. So it's a little chat app. You notice the very first message was written by the Firebase bot. That was written in a Cloud Function. So when I signed up for the first time as a new user, the Cloud Function was invoked, and it wrote a message to the Firebase database, and then Angular Fire, syncing the database to the DOM, the message just appeared. So if any of you go to that URL and log in, some new messages should appear, assuming the app is working correctly. The URL is cloud-functions-angular.firebaseapp.com. Looks like Eden already signed in, and we got a welcome message for him. So you'll notice that some of the fonts are different on those messages. Is that visible? Can you see those fonts? So what I did is I deployed another Cloud Function, and that one is executed whenever a new message is written. It takes the text of the message, and it passes it through the Google Cloud Natural Language API. And then I take the sentiment that is found within the message as well as the entities, and I save them back to the message in the Firebase database. And then here on the front end, I look at the sentiment, and if it's above or below certain thresholds, I change the font to look more happy or more negative. So it'd be interesting to see if any of you can post a message that gets you to like the really, really happy flowery font. I think it's like 0.9 sentiment or above. The other thing I do is at the bottom of the list, you see there's this recent topics. So the entities that are extracted from the text, I'm just listing them there in order of salience, or like how important they were in the sentences. So I am angry. That must not have been above the threshold that I put in. So Usually you need longer sentences to increase like the magnitude of the sentiment to kind of get more information. So that's what the app is. So if we go back to the code lab, we're going to start out with a Firebase Angular app that does not yet have that natural language or functionality. So step 1, overview. Everybody got that? What you'll learn: how to create cloud functions using the Firebase SDK, how to trigger them, how to add Firebase Cloud Messaging to your app. You need an editor, you need a terminal, you need a browser, and you need the sample code. So let's go on to getting the sample code. Step 2, get the sample code. The app is called Friendly Chat. It's on in a repo on GitHub. So maybe I need to make this a little bigger. Hopefully you can also see it on your own laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this right now. Make this bigger too. Okay, so I just cloned the Friendly Chat repo. I'm going to go into there. I think that's what it wanted me to do next. So within the Friendly Chat repository, there are 2 folders. There's Cloud Functions Angular and Cloud Functions Angular Start. Cloud Functions Angular is the completed app. So if you want to dive in there and just kind of look around, see the completed code, you can go in there. To actually run through the code lab, we're going to need the Cloud Functions Angular Start folder. So using your IDE, open or import the Cloud Functions Angular Start directory. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to make this full screen real quick. So Cloud Functions Angular Start. Ooh, I opened too much stuff. Let's go into the directory. CD. See, I'm getting notifications. That means the notifications Cloud Function is working. So now I'm going to open Visual Studio. Make it full screen again. Better memorize this hotkey. So back to the code lab. What does it want me to do? So I opened it in my editor. Next step. Step 3, create a Firebase project and set up your app. You can click the link. It'll take you to the Firebase console. If you are already at firebase.com, you can go to the console. Firebase.google.com, sorry. Let's see, new project, my awesome project, ng-conf. I'm going to just call it ng-conf. Creating project. Here we go, I got a new project. So this is the Firebase console that you'll see on any project that you start. You can see on the left, it's got a bunch of tabs to access various features of Firebase. So back to the code lab. Which way was it? Oh, it's right here. Creating a new project. Initialize the web app. OK, so I got to click this big pink button in the console. There it is on the right. So I'm going to click that, add Firebase to your web app. It's going to generate some config that's tied to your project. And according to the instructions here, it wants me to copy couple of the lines. So these are just a bunch of config values that your app will need in order to function. So I'm going to copy those. Normally you would copy the entire snippet if you were writing your Firebase app using plain JavaScript, but because we're using Angular Fire, it takes advantage of Angular modules and the environments files that the Angular CLI provides. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy these. I'm going to go over to my app, and I'm going to find source environment.prod.ts, and you can see there's a big to-do comment in there. And I'm going to paste those config values. So what that does is when you run the production build of your Angular app, these configuration values will just get injected into your app for you. So if I go back to the instructions. Oh, enlarge the code? Yeah, so source environment.prod.ts. So I think in the instructions it's saying, yeah, down here it says which file to go put that stuff into. I think I need to refresh this real quick. Yep. So right here we also need to enable the service worker for Firebase Cloud Messaging. I need to take that messaging sender ID value and copy it to source Firebase messaging sw.js. So I'm going to go back to my code real quick. I'm just going to grab this, and I'm going to find this file, Firebase Messaging Service Worker, and I'm going to paste in my messaging sender ID. People are still posting, and I'm getting lots of notifications. So I got my messaging sender ID. Back to the instructions. Enable Google Auth. So to do that, I go back to the Firebase console. I'm going to close this window. Let's see, authentication. It's on the left. I'm going to go to authentication, set up sign-in method, go to Google, enable, save. That was strangely easy. Now users can log into my app using Google. Seems like there should be more work. Okay, next step, step 4, Angular command line interface. Some of you may already have this installed. If you don't have the Angular CLI installed yet, let's see, npm install, or npm-g install @angular/CLI. I already have it installed, but I'm just going to run this. I'm on Ethernet, so hopefully that means it'll be really fast. Normally I would use yarn, but what is going on here? I guess Chrome only displays 3 notifications at a time, and as you close them, it shows the rest. npm, show me how fast you can be. Wait, one more. If you're waiting for your Angular CLI to install, just nod. Okay, I see some people waiting for Angular CLI to install. Oh, something's happening. There, it's done. So now that I have Angular CLI installed, I can run the ng command, and it gives me all the help text for the CLI. If I go back to the code lab, it says, make sure you've got 1.0.0 or newer installed. So I can verify that by running ng version. And it looks like I do have 1.0.0. I have no idea what those errors are for. I don't know. Hopefully nothing too scary. Okay, next step. The package.json file within the Cloud Functions Angular Start folder lists all the dependencies we need for the chat app. So to install those, looks like I'm already in the Cloud Functions Angular Start directory, so I'm going to run npm install, make sure I get all the dependencies. This will include production dependencies like Angular and Angular Fire, as well as development dependencies needed to compile the code and do stuff like that. Run the web server. So once again, I find myself waiting for npm. Who has heard of yarn? Raise your hand. Who uses yarn instead of npm? Raise your hand. Who has experienced massive improvements in install times using yarn? Yeah, me too. I just figured I'd use npm to, everybody knows what npm is. So, waiting for dependencies to install. I can actually show what some of those are. So, production dependencies include a bunch of Angular libraries, Firebase, Angular Fire 2, some other dependencies, a bunch of development dependencies, TypeScript. Who has never used the Angular CLI before? A few people. For me, the first time I used it was when I put together this code lab, and I found it very smooth. So it was really quick to get up and running. I was impressed. Looks like it's done. So I have all my dependencies. Back to the instructions. Step 5, install the Firebase command line interface. Am I going too fast? Is anyone running way ahead of me? You just going faster through your slides? Okay. If you're stuck, raise your hand. We have some TAs who can come help you. So, okay. We need the Firebase SDK. npm-g install Firebase-tools. I'm going to do that right now. This allows you to do things like manage your Firebase projects, deploy your static files to Firebase hosting, upload your security rules, and deploy the Cloud Functions. I think it will install a little quicker than the Angular CLI. Done. So that was fast. So once you have it installed, make sure you have version 3.5.0 or newer. You can run Firebase version. And I'm at 3.6.0, so we're good. Back to the instructions. Okay, log in. Firebase, I'll put that up top. Firebase, log in. Yes, give you all the information. Allow. Successfully logged in. Okay, that's my email. Oh, Chrome, that's where my instructions are, okay. I keep seeing Homer, I'm like, that's not it. Switch tabs, okay. Let's see, make sure you're using your new project. So go Firebase use -- add. So I just recently created a new Firebase project, and I need to tell the CLI, or the Firebase SDK, that in this directory, I want to use that project that I just created. Firebase use -- add, and it's going to be interactive. It's going to prompt me for which project. And ng-conf 7b276. I'm guessing that's it. I'm just going to hit enter. Alias for the project. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call it code lab. There we go. I've configured my local directory to use my ng-conf project that I created. At this point, I'm ready to start deploying. Why does it keep listing files? Anyway. Next step, step 6, build, deploy, and run the web app. So if you've used the Angular CLI before, then you're familiar that it has ng-serve and it has ng-build. ng-serve spins up a local web server where it can host your app for you real quick, and it by default will load like your development environment. So it's really fast. It doesn't like compress anything. It doesn't minify. It doesn't version the files. So if you wanted, when you're developing, you would just run ng-serve and then open like localhost 4200, and the app would be there. It would be working. But we went and pasted our configuration values into the production environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to just straight away, we're going to run the production build. So ng-build -- prod -- AOT. It's going to give us some nice optimizations. What this is going to do is take all the Angular files and compile them and spit them out into a dist folder. And that dist folder is what's going to be deployed by Firebase. It's going to be the static files. And if you're wondering why, if you dive into the code here in this directory, there's like a Firebase .json file. It has a bunch of configuration that the SDK uses to know how to deploy. You can see here that under the hosting section, public, dist. So that's why the dist folder is being uploaded, if you're wondering. You can set it to whatever you want. Let's see, I finished my production build. So at this point, what does it want me to do? It wants me to deploy everything except the functions, because I haven't written them yet, so we don't want to deploy functions. So Firebase deploy -- except functions. And that'll deploy like security rules, database rules, and your static files. So I'm just going to run that. And just like that, I deployed. So I'm going to copy this hosting URL, go back to my browser, open it, and we have, again, a friendly chat app. Good so far? This one definitely has a lot of messages in it, doesn't it? Oh my goodness. Did everybody, who did not log into this app? Okay, only 5 of you. All right, so this is the one I just deployed. It works. So if I click sign in with Google, I'm signing in for the first time, so I'm going to allow it to view my basic profile information. I'm signed in. It's prompting me to allow notifications. And I'm going to type a message. Hello. All right, so my new app works. Yeah. So those curious about Firebase's real-time database, I just typed into an input field. I hit enter. What just happened? Because the message appeared above in the list. What happened there? So what I did, if we just look into the code real quick, let's go into some Angular code. Source app There's the familiar app.component files. If I come in here to app.component.ts, I can find a save message function. That's pretty big. Okay, save message. So that happens on the submit event of that form. And this is the important code right here. These couple lines. So using the Angular Fire library, which was injected in the constructor, if I just scroll back up. Here's the constructor. I just inject Angular Fire. I name it AF. You can name it whatever you want. So I injected Angular Fire. And then right here, I just say this.af.database.list. And what I'm doing is I'm referencing a path within the database called messages. The Firebase database is basically a giant JSON tree. And so I'm referencing the messages path within that database. And I just say messages.push, and I pass in a JSON object, JavaScript object. I gave you some data. I gave the text that I wrote, the name of the user, and my profile URL for my photo. And that was it. Just this one line of code. And what that does is it goes and talks to the database, Firebase servers. And if I go back to my browser, to the console, and instead of authentication, I go to database, I can see that there is indeed a messages path within the database. And if I open that up, I can see there's one entry. It has a unique ID, and there is hello. There's the text that I entered. So what about the syncing part? You know, that three-way data binding that's been advertised. So Angular Fire, you know, along with the Firebase client library, they set up sort of a connection back to the Firebase servers. And if this data in the database were to change, it would notify the client, and Angular Fire is going to take that notification and give it to Angular, and Angular is going to do its thing and update the DOM. So I can see here that my message was hello. I could be sneaky. I could come in here and I could change this, add like hello world. And if I go back over to here, it now says hello world. So that's the sort of the syncing that goes on. You know, with very minimal code, I've already got this syncing between clients. I can open this in multiple browsers. So second tab, hello world, it's the same in both tabs. If I come back here and hello, add an exclamation point, both tabs got updated just quickly. So for any of you like who are brand new to Firebase, that's the sort of the three-way binding that Firebase offers. So what were we doing? We deployed an app. We signed in. Notice in my new app, I did not get the welcome message. No welcome message, no notification. That's because that functionality, you know, in this case, was functionality that we kind of wanted to do on the server. But we don't have a server. You know, I ran Firebase deploy and pushed some static assets up. I didn't run a server. I don't have like a VPS anywhere. I didn't spin up any Express app or anything. I just let's do some functions. Okay. Thank you for making me move faster. All right, so I deployed the functions directory. So the convention here is that within your Firebase project, you create a functions directory, and then inside that, an index.js file. This file is what gets deployed, and it's as simple as writing some functions inside that file and then exporting them. So let's start. cd functions ls, that's what it wants me to do. cd functions ls. So I got two files, index.js and package.json. Package.json lists a couple dependencies. Firebase functions allows us to specify triggers for our functions. Firebase admin allows us to talk to the Firebase servers and manipulate data and stuff like that. So I think it wanted us to install those, so I'm going to run npm install. And I find myself waiting for npm. Here we go. That was quick. Only two dependencies. Next, index.js. I'm going to open that up. It's just a bunch of comments so far. To-do developer, that would be me. Okay. Import the cloud functions for Firebase and Firebase admin modules here. That must be step 8. There they are. So I'm going to grab those, paste them on the first line. There we go. Next. Oh, I guess we should note that this initialize app code, that's going to read our Firebase, our config for our project, so that the function, once it's deployed, it knows what project it's, what config it's using. So let's add a function that runs when a user signs in for the very first time. So we're going to add back those welcome messages to my new app. So back to Cloud Functions, I mentioned the triggers. One of the triggers is functions.auth.onCreate. I think this is actually a link, so if you have this on your laptop, you can click this link and it'll take you to some documentation on the trigger. But back to here, what this does is it says whenever a new user signs in for the first time, I run this function. So let's add a function called add welcome messages to index.js. So I'm going to copy this. Back to here, add the add welcome messages function here. Save that. If I look at the code, I specify my trigger. Okay. The other app is still working. I specified my trigger by basically sort of wrapping my function definition in this method call, functions.auth.user.onCreate. And then right here is the actual function, the handler that gets invoked when this function is being executed. It takes an event argument. And this event argument, it will have some metadata properties on it, like an ID for the event, a timestamp for the event, other stuff. Event.data is going to be the payload. So regardless of what your trigger is, event.data is probably something you'll be accessing. For example, if your function was triggered by a file being uploaded to Firebase storage, then event.data would be the file object. If your function was triggered by a pub/sub message being published, then event.data would be the pub/sub message. So in this case, it looks like event.data was the user that signed in for the first time. I could get their display name. And what I do is I say, OK, go grab that messages path, and we're going to push onto it a new message. Looks like we're going to say the message was authored by Firebase bot. And we're just going to say, welcome. I'm going to change this message. Sign in for the first time. Welcome you. OK, that's something different. So to deploy the function. The function will be active after you've deployed it. On the command line, run Firebase deploy -- only functions. I already deployed the static files, so I don't need to run that. And one thing I haven't figured out yet is if I need to be in the functions directory when I run this command or not. So I'm going to go up one directory and run it. So what this does is it takes the source code for your function, it packages it up into a zip file, and then it uploads it to cloud storage. And then it calls out to the Cloud Functions API, and it creates a new function. And then it says, hey, I uploaded some source code. I want you to deploy it. And then it probably takes maybe 2 minutes, maybe the first time you do it. And then the functions are executed in a Node.js environment. It's basically kind of like a Linux, Unix type environment. It has native binaries available, a temporary file system. It has the image magic binary, and I think a few other binaries available. When you upload your code, your dependencies will be installed as well. So, I mean, whatever you're going to do with a Node.js server, I mean, you can do it here. You just write your Node.js code, you upload it, you do whatever. Apparently, I posted a message that I am gorgeous. Somebody's impersonating me. So while I'm waiting for that function to deploy, I'm going to come investigate over here. That's a lot of recent topics. I forgot to trim it down. Lots of names. I like how time is the most important recent topic. Only Kato is logged into my new app. Still deploying the function. So let's see. While I'm waiting, any questions? Go ahead.
It's kind of weird that the function deploy had its own package JSON. So would it generally be like a separate repo just for your Firebase functions? Because now we have two.
You have two package.json files, right? Yeah.
You could do that. You would need two Firebase.jsons too, though. I mean, in the Firebase project, you can make any full functions.
OK, so his question was, it's kind of weird having package.json within the functions directory, because now you kind of got like two of them. And Cato was saying, well, I mean, you could move it somewhere else, but then you'd have to have two Firebase.json files, right? I mean, you technically could put your static files in one repo, your functions in another, your security rules in another repo, and then, but they would all just need to have some sort of Firebase.json file that can then deploy them all to the same project. I mean, you win some, you lose some, I guess. So it finished deploying. Project console, all functions deploy. So how do we test? I think it has some instructions here. Test the function. Who wants to sign into my app? Can you see that URL? ng-conf-7b276.firebaseapp.com. It worked. Cato signed in for the first time. So there we did, our first cloud function. So historically, the last several years, if you wanted to do that, you had to pair a server with your Firebase project. So now you don't need to. You can just write a cloud function and have the Firebase SDK deploy it for you. If this function needed to be executed 10,000 times every minute, Cloud Functions would scale it up for you and execute it 10,000 times every minute. So, and you just don't have to worry about that. Back to the instructions. Okay, so we did the welcome message. Next up. So this one, we're going to add some image moderation. You might have noticed that there's some image functionality in the app. If we go back over here, if I click this, I can upload an image, right? So image moderation. We might want to moderate certain images. So to do this, we can use the Google Cloud Vision API to detect whether a given image has maybe adult or violent content in it. It might be kind of weird if you wanted to do that from the browser. You'd have to expose your API key, which maybe you don't want to do. It seems like calling out to one of Google's machine learning APIs, you might want to do that on the server. So Cloud Functions, that's where they can come in handy there. In this case, our trigger is not going to be a new user signing up. It's going to be a change in Firebase storage, specifically a new image being added. So basically what this function is going to do is it's going to take the new image that was just uploaded, run it through the Cloud Vision API. If the image is flagged, we're going to shell out to the image magic binary and have it blur the image for us. Once we have the blurred image, we're going to upload it on top of the image that was originally uploaded. We're going to moderate the image. So enable the Cloud Vision API. This particular API requires that billing be enabled. So heads up. If you don't want to enable billing, then feel free to skip this step and just listen. But it does require that billing be enabled. It's purely for fraud prevention purposes. So to do this, you may already have billing enabled. So click this link. It's listed. It's highlighted right there. Click this link to enable the API. And what that does is it opens the console for the Google Cloud Platform project associated with your Firebase project. Select project, ng-conf. There's my project. So I'm going to open that project. Whenever you create a Firebase project, it creates a companion Google Cloud Platform project. It's that integration between Google Cloud Platform and Firebase that kind of necessitates that. What it also means is that if I were to upload an image to Firebase storage, yes, I can go look at those files, browse them in the Firebase console, but I can also see them in the Cloud Storage console, in the Cloud Platform console. So that's the integration there. Right now, I'm just waiting for this API to show up. Refresh. There it is. OK, so I'm in the API manager within the Cloud Platform console. This is where you can enable and disable APIs and also look at quotas and their usage and how often your apps are calling them. So I'm just going to click this enable button. Oh, it wants me to enable billing. I already created a billing account, so I'm just going to grab mine on my own account. Anything you do in this code lab will be well within the free tier quotas, so don't worry about getting charged. But you will need to create a billing account if you want to do the Vision API step. It's basically entering in your name, address, and some payment information like a credit card. It might take a minute, so I'm just going to wait 60 seconds to give people time to do that if they're going to before I move on. If you look at this this dashboard, so I just enabled the Vision API. There's no data here because I haven't called it yet. If your app was running in production and it was calling the Vision API, you could come here and you could get the stats on this API. How often your app's calling it, what kind of latency you're experiencing, whether or not you've run into any errors with the API, and you can view all that information here. Quotas. Looks like there is a quota of 1,000 requests per 100 seconds or something like that. A bunch of different quotas. We're going to be well within the, unless you guys all upload like 1,000 images at the same time, I think we'll be good. All right, hopefully you've gotten the Vision API enabled if you're moving forward with this step. So I got the Vision API enabled. Time to install some additional dependencies. We have a client library for the Cloud Vision API. So I'm going to install that. There's also one for the Cloud Storage API, so we're going to need to install that. Looks like we prefer to call out to child processes using a promise-based library, so we're going to install that. I'm going to copy this command, run over back to my functions directory, cd functions, npm install --save. Remember the --save because this stuff needs to get added to the package.json file. That way when they're deployed, the dependencies will be installed correctly. So I find myself waiting for npm again. With this index.js file, where we're writing our function code, we're just putting everything in one file. I mean, obviously, if you're deploying a lot of functions, you don't want to be writing a 10,000 line file. So you could easily split it into multiple files and just use require like you normally would, and it'll all work. As long as you still have the main index.js file that imports other code, I mean, you can modularize it all you want. So dependencies were installed. Now what? Import and configure the dependencies. So I'm going to copy these 3 lines. I'm going to go back over to index.js, just paste them at the top. Next, detecting inappropriate images. So like I mentioned, our trigger is going to be when a new image is added to Firebase storage. So here we're going to export a function called blur offensive images. And the handler is going to be invoked whenever there's a change. So there's a couple conditionals right here at the top of the code. And those are there because this function will be called not only when an image is uploaded, but also when an image is changed or when an image is deleted. And in this case, we only care about when an image is uploaded. So we're just going to ignore like the deletion event and the deploy event. And so that's why those returns are there. So let's go paste this in. Write blur offensive images function here. Save that. And what the function itself does, once it makes it past those conditionals, is it grabs the bucket and file name where the image was uploaded, and we're going to call out to the Vision API. And it has a convenience method called detect safe search. It's going to take the image, send it to the Vision API, and the Vision API is going to detect whether there's adult, violent content. What are the other ones? Like there's like medical and what? Spoof? Memes. Oh, okay. Yeah, so here we say if it detects adult or violent content, then what we're going to do is we're going to call this blur image function. I don't think we have it yet, so maybe it's over in the instructions somewhere. There it is, blur image. So if I dive through this code real quick, it does some stuff. And important thing is it downloads the image that was uploaded. I mentioned that there's a temporary file system in the Cloud Functions environment, which makes this possible. So the Cloud Function gets invoked, and it's actually going to download that image to the temporary file system of the Cloud Function. And then at this point, it looks like it shells out to the ImageMagick binary, and it's blurring it. And then third step is it uploads the blurred image on top of the originally saved image, so it's been moderated. And then the last thing we do is we go find the message associated with that image when it's uploaded, and we mark it as moderated. So I'm going to copy that code real quick and deploy. Probably should have started deployment and then started talking about the code. So I got my function. There's that Firebase deploy only functions. Whoops, wrong spot. Over here. Can I run that in the functions directory?
It doesn't matter, it's just like node, it'll go up.
Oh, it'll go up? Oh, sweet, let's do it. I just never tried.
That was the first thing I tried, yeah.
It's the first thing you tried, okay. You think about that more than I do then.
How can I break it?
How can I break it? Yeah, so you're a developer advocate, right? So Brett and Cato are developer advocates. James and I are developer programs engineers. So in developer relations, our jobs just kind of involve being customer zero. So that mindset of how can I break it? You know, the sooner I can break it as a developer programs engineer, the sooner I can get feedback to the engineering teams that are building stuff. And so if any of you are really into the open source and like building projects and interfacing with developers, like you should check out developer relations at Google. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So we're waiting for the functions to deploy, and they finished. It was notably faster this time. Function was deployed. How do we test it? Okay, looks like we have a flesh-eating zombies image. I'm going to try and upload it. Or maybe I can just download it. Okay, save link as. Something should have happened when I clicked that. I know it. Maybe I already have it on my computer. Nope. Downloads, zombie, flesh, what was it called? Zombie, I do have it. Oh, there it is. That is nasty. We better moderate that. Okay. So I already downloaded it, so I can skip that. So to test, over to the app. Upload image. Okay, lots of people signed into my own new app. Somebody already did it. Okay. It's been blurred. I will admit that I didn't have time to figure out how to make it refresh after the blurred image was written, so we'll update the app to do that eventually. So you notice I had to do a refresh to see the blurred image. There we go. We moderated the image. Next step. Step 11. New message notifications. So here we're going to use Firebase Cloud Messaging. The way this usually works is it needs to store device tokens from devices so it can push stuff out to them. So to do that, we're going to use a third trigger. This one is going to be the database.path.onWrite trigger. What we're doing is we're saying whenever a certain part of the database gets modified, I want to know, and I want this function to be invoked. So if I go back over to this database real quick, we can see that lots of messages have been added to this path. So /messages/message ID, that's the trigger. /messages/message ID, that's the tongue twister. So in the database, whenever any of those messages get changed or whenever something is added or deleted, that means this function is going to be updated. Send notifications. So I'm going to copy this. It's quite a big function. I'm going to go put it in my file. Right, send notifications here. And I'm going to do what I should have done last time. I'm going to deploy first, talk about it later. Deploy. Looks like what this function does is it says, okay, a new message was written. What should we do? We're going to grab the value of the message. So that way we can formulate the notification that we want to show the user. It's going to grab like up to 100 characters of text. It'll truncate it. If there's more than that, it's going to grab the user's profile image, and the action for the notification is we're going to just send them to the app that they were on. And then we go grab the token. We send the notification to the device. And we clean up tokens that are not registered anymore. So there was that service worker file that at the very beginning we had to add a messaging sender ID to. That's running in the background, and it's going to be able to grab those notifications and activate them for us. So we are deployed. I'm pretty sure I allowed notifications on this app. So I think I have to like go somewhere else, and then somebody want to post something? I should get a notification, right? Do I need to close the tab? Okay, let's close the tab. You got a notification? Who's getting notifications? Yeah, a couple people? Did this work? Okay, well, I'm in the tab, so if I come over here, it seems like if I'm not on the tab, I should get the notification, right? Maybe they're just in traffic or something. I've only seen a couple more messages. I'll just watch this. Okay, somebody, maybe if I write something here. Plus, test. Oh, that's not going to work, is it? Cancel. Is anybody writing messages on my app? Yeah? Cato, you are? It's working for you? So you're getting the notifications? All right. Do I need to close the tab? Well, we know they were working earlier because I got like 1,000 of them. There they come. They were just stuck in traffic, like I said. Okay. I knew they were coming. Yeah. Got a lot of notifications. Okay. Last. Final step. Optional. Natural language API. So I need to enable the API. Click that link. It's going to open the console again. I got to select a project again. ng-conf. Open. There we go. Enable Cloud Natural Language API. This one also requires billing, like the Vision API. So if you want to do this step, you needed to do the billing part. So I have it. And what this function is going to do is it's going to take new messages that are written. It's going to send them to the Cloud Natural Language API. That API will extract sentiment and entities from the messages. And then it'll basically save those results onto the message. And then in our front end, we just kind of messed around with those sentiment values to just kind of add some functionality. So I enabled it. I need to install it as a dependency. Here we go. That was quick. I need to pull it into my index.js file, stick that at the top, right below these ones. So I got language, and then the function code itself. This one's pretty simple. Stick this at the bottom. And then I'm going to deploy real quick. Here we go. And then the function, what it does is it uses that same on-write trigger. So whenever a message is added to that messages path, we're going to skip modified messages because we only care about new messages. We're going to pass the text of the message into the natural language API. We're going to call this annotate method. And then as options, we're just saying that I want entities and sentiment. The third thing that you can get with the natural language API is syntax. It's quite detailed. If you wanted to extract the actual grammar and structure of the sentence and get all that information, you could. Once I get the result, I just take them and I save them right back onto the message itself. So when this is done, we should just be able to write a few messages. Okay, so it's done. I'm just going to come in here and I am so happy. And then I'm going to go to this bottom message, I think is the one I just wrote. And you can see that some sentiment just got added by the cloud function. Score of 0.8. And with that score, I should have gotten my font changed. I did. It looks a little happy, that font. So the thresholds I put in are, if it's 0.9 or above, you'll get like this really flowery font. If it's like negative 0.5, then you'll get some like kind of scrawl. If it's negative 0.9 or lower, you get like this really creepy looking font. This is so boring. There you go. It's kind of a negative font there. Recent topics, Kung Fu, match, mine. Interesting. Your Kung Fu is no match for mine. There we go. Natural language API. I mean, we did that in like 60 seconds, right? So you can dive into the Angular code to just kind of see what we were doing there to like fiddle with the fonts and stuff like that. If we go back here, I think the last step is to pat ourselves on the back. Here we go. You have now deployed some cloud functions. You've triggered them based on auth events, cloud storage events, real-time database events. You got some Firebase Cloud Messaging working in your app. You got the Angular and Firebase CLI going. There you go. That's Firebase. I'm going to be at the AMA right now. I'm going to head over there. So if any of you have questions, like go to the AMA right now, and I'll be there. So thank you very much.